All right, we're back. We are COMP123 in the summer 2017 semester here at Centennial, and we are week 12, part 3 of our broadcast. Not a lot of people here today for whatever reason. Maybe there's a test and database later, but who knows? Some reason. Maybe it's because before the long weekend, but that's okay. We're going to build a calculator today, part of a calculator UI. The Lab 26 for you guys is up on eCentennial, and Lab 26 is not the calculator UI we're building today. It's to start building your BMI calculator for assignment 5, right? So at the end of this, we're going to record for about an hour, and then at the end of the hour, I'll give you a chance to work on your Lab 26, which is actually assignment 5's user interface, right? So that's what's going to happen today. That's the exercise today, and then I can give you some feedback and give you some guidance on your user interface design. You'll notice some of the stuff we talk about today will prepare you for building your user interface, and that's really what we're going to be talking about today. All right, so we're going to kick off Visual Studio. I'm going to kick off Visual Studio. And with Visual Studio, I'm going to make a new project. I'm going to start a new Windows form application. And I'm going to call it COMP123, Summer 2017, and it's Lesson 12B2. Because B, we already did, was a demo. B2 is our calculator app that we're going to build. And I'm going to attach it to Git again, a new Git repository for it. I'm going to click OK. And it's going to generate a new project for me. All right, so here I got this new project. What is the first thing that I should do now that I've got the project going? This could have been a quiz today. So quiz question number 1, what do I do first? I got the project going, and then what do I do? I want to make a calculator, right?
Rename the name of the form.
Thank you. Rename the form. Number 1, and this is what you should do with your exam. So when you go to your form, right? Thank you. You guys are quicker than the last class. So you're going to go to your form, and you're going to right-click, rename, right? Right-click, rename. And you're going to rename the form calculator form, right? And I did calculator earlier today, but it's really a calculator form, which I recommend, right? That's what it should be called. And then if it says, hey, here's my, do you want to propagate the changes kind of thing? And the answer is yes, right? Always press yes, because if you press no, bad things will happen, right? Okay, so that's step 1. What's step 2? What do I do next? I got my form, I renamed it, and I want to make a calculator, right? What's the next step? What next thing I should do? Yes?
The name of the form.
The name of the form says Form 1. Yeah, I could do that. Okay, so that's one thing I could do. So let's pull that in. So I'm going to click on this, and oh man, where is my properties? I don't have my properties. It got closed. How do I get it back? How do I get my properties window back now?
I
could have pressed F4. I could go up here to Quick Launch, right? So I recommend if you can't find something, go to property. If I start typing properties, you can see that it gives you the quick hit, right? Or you can it'll come up. I can pin it on now, right? Or pin it off, right? So there's my form. I need my properties. And I want to change the form of the text field of the form control. I want to change it so it says calculator. Okay, cool. So I got that part done. Next, step 2, or that's step 2. Step 3, what do I do now? There's some problems with the form by default. What are the problems, right? Center. All right, you're answering all the questions today. So center screen. Okay, next. These are all like Tom's fixes, right?
I don't like the maximize button.
I don't like the maximize button because it doesn't make any sense. That's why. Not because it can't work properly, but the maximize button makes no sense. So turn it off, right? What else? How about over there? Somebody else. There's other things I need to change. Yes? The? Size. Okay, so are you talking about the resizing? What are you talking about? The size of the form or the resizing capability? The resizing would be under, if you go to form border style, and you want to change from sizable to fixed single, right? So now it can't be resized manually. Cool. All right, I want you guys to make this thing, one more thing. We also make sure that the auto scale mode changes from font change that to none. Again, that's one thing that people forgot to do. Okay, so I'm helping you think about building a calculator because you're building a calculator, BMI calculator, something different for your assignment, right? Now you've already done it probably in JavaScript, a lot of you. So think about, you already have an idea of what it's going to look like. So I'm going to right click here on my calculator, or actually if I go to, let's do it this way. We'll go to font. Here's font. I want to change the default font to 20, right? Now, if you've done it correctly, and if you change the auto scale mode to false, then you shouldn't have a problem if I go 20. Your form should not resize. If you didn't change this somehow, and if you left auto scale mode, right? Auto scale mode, if you left it to font, your form will like grow it immensely, right? So don't do that. That's why I put auto scale mode to none, all right? Next, I want to make this form 320 by 480, just like your BMI form. So I'm going to go to 320 by 480. Notice I can type in here too. I don't have to expand. I can just type. There you go. And I want to use a reference. And one of the things that students always tell me is, Tom, I'm not an artist. I'm not an artist, Tom. I don't know how to lay things out. I'm not a user interface designer. And you know what? That's false, right? You guys can be technical artists, and you have a lot of resources that most artists 20 years ago never had. You have Photoshop. You have lots of little paint tools. You can cut and paste. You can do all kinds of stuff to make yourselves not necessarily artistic, the sense of an artist, but actually a technical artist. I learned this from one of my professors when I was learning about graphic design. And the one thing that always irked him, that irks me, is when people say, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to do that, right? And the answer is, yeah, you can, but you can learn, and it's not that difficult, right? So I'm not asking you to draw stuff by hand. I'm asking you to lay things out here. And that's what we're doing. That's the exercise today. Let's lay out my calculator. We're not going to do the functionality today. Okay, we're going to do the functionality for the calculator on Tuesday, all right? So look forward to that. And your lab 26, which is up on eCentennial, isn't to finish this calculator. The lab 26 on eCentennial is to finish your assignment 5's user interface. Now, even though your assignment 5 is due 2 weeks from now, or 2 weeks from Tuesday, I'm trying to get you to get going on your user interface, and I'm paying you for it. I'm paying you 0.5% of your final grade to start, right? So that's what's due by tomorrow night at midnight. Okay, I've given you an extra day. Normally it's due the same night by midnight, but it's due Friday night at midnight. It'll give you an extra 24 hours to do what you have to do. Okay, so we've done this. We've set up our default forms. Before I put any user controls in here whatsoever, I want to go on GitHub. I want to start my GitHub solution, right? So I'm going to go to Team Explorer, right? I'm going to go to Changes. But wait a minute. Did we do any kind of documentation? No. So I got to do that too. So let's go to my Solution Explorer first. And I'm going to go uncheck this. Now, where are the two places I want to do my documentation by default? Remember, Forms project is different than a console project, right? Console project, so far we've had lots and lots of classes. Right now, we're only dealing with user interface, right? So there's two places I want you to document. One is the program.cs file, right? So double click here. It'll open up the program.cs file and start documenting your name and all that stuff, right? So here, you're going to put your name, right? You're going to put the date, which is today's August 3rd. Right? A description, a short description of what this file is about or what the project's about. This is a calculator demo project. That's what it is, right? And your version is 0.1, right? Which you created the project. That's what you've done so far, right? And then you're going to end this off like this. And I want you to copy the same thing. Now, please also add your student ID. If you're a student, you should add your student ID in here. I'm not, so I'm not going to add mine. But you can also add the same thing into the calculator form. How do I get to my code behind file? I can right-click, right? And notice that the default, the quick hit for it is F7, right? So if I hit F7, it'll take me to the code behind file of my my design, right? So I'm going to go down here, make a couple spaces, and just drag that in again, okay? Now, you're going to say, well, why do I put it two places? One, because your program is your driver file, and we're going to make some changes later on. This is where you're going to make some of your changes. Right now, we're just creating the projects. There's nothing else to put in here. I didn't make the class by myself, right? Microsoft, the project build created it for me, so it's not me, right? So I'm not documenting anything extra. Okay, under Team Explorer now, I'm going to go to Changes, and I'm going to see a couple changes here. I'm going to say created calculator object. That's all I've done, right? Commit all. Ask me to save. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Sync, and I'm going to go to Publish to GitHub. By the way, if some of you still don't have GitHub set up, and I know some people submitted their stuff without GitHub, that's crazy, man. Crazy. Set up your GitHub. Come on, get it going. You guys should have that running by now. This is like, you've been with me for a couple weeks now. It's not the first week we've been together, right? So you're just losing marks every time, right? All right, cool. So we've got GitHub set up, and now I'm ready to start creating, okay? I can close off my program file for now. I can even close off my code behind file because I don't need it today. I'm not doing anything in here. I'm only doing stuff with this. Okay. Like I said, I need a good reference, and I'm going to use the built-in Windows 10 calculator as a reference. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I'm not going to put in this row of stuff. I'm not going to have that in my calculator. I'm not going to have this row of stuff in my calculator. I'm just going to focus on these 5 rows right here. Okay, these 5 rows. And I need 5 rows, 4 columns. There's 4 columns, right? This is a perfect candidate for grid. Some kind of table layout. Perfect candidate, right? And I also need some kind of result area, an area that shows my result, whatever the result of my calculations is. Okay, up here. Okay, so where I'm going to start, again, on the left, I'm going to find my table layout. So I'm going to say table layout, and I'm going to drag and drop my table layout panel onto my application. All right, there it is. Okay, notice I'm going to just put it to the left a little bit by eye. I'm going to resize it by eye a little bit. I didn't do this early today, but I'm going to do this anyway. Here's my layout, right? And I want to kind of make it hug everything a little bit more closely because, you know, you might try and do this. There's problems with this. I want to show you what the problems are. So here's what's happening. Okay, this is my layout. And now this is 2 columns and 2 rows. This is wrong, right? By the way, I did it by eye. Remember what I just said? Bad by eye, right? Should always do it by actually seeing it. So I'm going to bring up my properties here for a second. I'm going to pin my properties up. Okay, cool. So this is good. I want to do this. I can use the smart arrow right here on the top right corner of my table layout. If I click onto it, and if I go to Edit Rows and Columns, okay, so what do I need again? I need 5 rows and 4 columns, right? So here's my columns. 4 columns is 25% each, right? 100% divided by 4. So I'm going to put that in there. So 25%, and this one 25%. Then I'm going to add a couple more, right, and make those 25% too. Right? Now I have 4 columns. Cool. Now I'm going to change this. On the top where it says columns, I'm going to change this to rows. And I'm going to add them first, let's say in this case. And I need 5 rows. So they're all going to be 100 divided by 5. 100% divided by 5 is 20% each, right? So again, I'm going here, and it's going to be 20. And for people who are in this morning's class that are still with me, forgive me. I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to try and be like a robot and say the exact same thing as earlier. It's really tough to hear it twice, but hey, you're here. Cool. All right, so, and do the same thing here. So there, we've made 5 rows and 4 columns. There's the 4 columns, and they're all equally spaced. And if I press OK, you can see that Microsoft's layout system tries to lay out these 5 rows and 4 columns equally. Okay? Yay. All right. We'll leave that for now. And what I want to try and do now is put my result area up here somewhere. Okay? So what kind of control do you think I should use for my result area? Anybody have an idea? Well, we talked about 4 different controls last day, right? We talked about a button. We talked about a label. We talked about a text box. And now we also talked about a table layout, right? So what are the 4? Which one of those 4 am I going to ask you to use? A what? A button on the result area? No. A label is okay, but the text box gives us more control, right? Label, when we put a label in there, you have no control. You lose some control. You can't really play around with the height too much. There's some issues. So I recommend a text box. So again, if I'm going to go over here and I'm going to start typing text and drag and drop it, here it is. And notice that it automatically is 20 because I set the form to 20. So whatever I set the form to, that's the default size of my controls, default font size, right? And that's what I asked you guys to do with your BMI calculator. And some of you said earlier today, 20 is too big, Tom. Might be. That's the default size of the font for your form. I didn't tell you to make all your controls 20 if you look at the requirements for your assignment number 5. Okay, cool. I'm going to drag and drop this one so it's kind of as wide as the screen. That's what I did earlier. And there's a problem with this, okay? Now notice that the buttons are down here, and let's look at my reference. Here's my reference. Does it look the same? Well, no, right? That's the first thing. No, it does not look the same. One thing is the background is a little darker, and I did this kind of differently earlier, right? So to change the background color, I'm going to click on my form, not the controls, the form itself, and notice that there is both the foreground or forecolor as well as the back color property. So I'm going to go to the back color property. And notice when I pull up the colors, I have system colors, I have web colors, and I have custom colors. Web colors are cool because it gives you lots of variation. I'm going to use a light gray for the background. So here's my light gray. And notice it turns a little darker. And if I compare that with my button, my calculator, it's not bad. It's maybe a little bit lighter than this, but it's close. Okay, cool. Now, my calculator is not going to be exactly the same thing because we're not going to have all the controls, and I'm going to keep this white, right? Okay, cool. The other thing I want to do is when I lay this out, right, there's going to be a problem, right? I don't want the user to type in here because this is a text box. I want the user just to be able to see what's in here, right? So in order for me to get the user not to type in here, I'm going to change the text box read-only property. Here's the read-only property to true. So now you can't actually type in there, right? It's only read-only. You can't modify anything that's in there. Okay. Let's see what this thing looks like. Okay, I'm just going to leave the grid there and this, and let's run it and see what it looks like. It looks like this. Uh-oh, there's a problem. So it looks like this here, and here it looks different. And look, there's a cursor that's flashing. Even though I can't really type in there, I can't type anything, even if I try, right? The cursor's flashing. And I don't want that, because that's not how a calculator works, right? So a couple things. One is this is way too close to the edges, right? And we need to change this. So what you see here is not what you get here sometimes, right? So that's one. So I can bring this in. Now, right now, by default, if you look at the size of my text box, just to look at it, it is 302 by 45. First of all, I think that's too big. Let's bring that in, and we're going to bring this in a couple times, by the way. Let's bring that into 300. Okay, so we're going to make it 300 for now, right? And we're starting off at the 0th location, right? So let's move that to 1. So 1, there we go. How does it look now? And let's just start this off. So I'm going to start, and still not quite right, yeah? But it looks a little better than last time. It still needs more. We have to shave off a little more, and we're going to do that later. But that's the one thing. So now that I know that this is what happens when I try and hug stuff to the left and to the right, I know that my buttons are going to be the same. I'm going to have the same problem, right? I'm showing you this because this is a common mistake people make. They try and hug things to the right of the side of the screen, and there's a little bit of padding and other things that, you know, make it so that it's not exactly what you think it's going to get. All right? All right, let's make some other modifications to this text box. One thing is I definitely want to make the text box background, because right now the background color is control. That's not good. I want my text box to be white. So I want to change the background color from my text box, back color, right, to web white, okay? And also, I want to change the way this looks, right? Instead of it being the border style. Now, forms have form border style, but controls have border style, all right? So if I look at border style, It's fixed 3D. I want to change this to fixing. Now, you can't notice it right here, but when you'll see it later, it does take up a little bit more space from a user interface design perspective. Okay, cool. So that's the two changes I made. And how do I stop people from even typing in there? Not even putting a cursor in there. There's a property called enabled. It's set to true by default for all controls. We're going to disable it. We're going to enable is equal to false. All right, let's try it now and see what it looks like. Enable false. Look at, I don't see a cursor anymore. And I just see this little line that goes around it. I can't type in there. I can't even copy it. It's just disabled. So I said, again, I put enable to false. Okay, cool. Now this presents other issues later on. And for example, I can't copy and paste the results of my calculator somewhere else. I won't be able to do that, right? But if I don't want the cursor, if I don't want anyone typing in there, that's what I can do. All right. I don't think the position of this thing is correct, and this isn't correct either. So if you look at my table layout by default, let's take a look at this. So my location is 187. Let's zero it for a second. Let's make it so it's 187, right? Okay, cool. And my size of my grid, so the size of my grid is 302 by 246. Let's make it so that it is 300 for now. But why 246? That's kind of an ugly number, right? That's kind of a weird number. And what if I wanted to make my form squarish, right? And what I mean by that is, well, take a look at this. This is rectangular, but if I wanted to make this square, right? And I have 4 columns, right? 4 columns, and there's 300 pixels or points. How many points for each square? 75, right? 300 divided by 4. 300 divided by 2 is 150, divided by 2 is 75, right? So 75, 75, 75, 75, but I have 4 of them here, right? So if I want to make them perfectly square, if I wanted to, I don't want to, but if I wanted to, then this whole grid would have to be 375 pixels tall, or points, right? So let's try this to show you what it looks like, and then we'll take it back. So here's 375. And now you can see that they're all square. Now, this design layout doesn't work for us, right? Doesn't work for us. Because one is they're all square big buttons. Now this thing, I want it to be a little higher, but not quite up here, right? And so my thoughts are they should probably be rectangular. Our reference shows rectangular buttons, and I want to make rectangular buttons, right? So 375 is too big. Let's reduce it. Oh, man. Let's reduce it to 300. And then we'll change the location. There's 300. I want to move it down. I'm doing it by eye right now, right, to about there. Okay. Notice that it is, the size is 300 by 300. My location is 1 by 138, right? 1 by 138. I know that I need to go to 1 because when I have my results and I made it at 0, it cut off, right? So 1 would be the minimum I want. It means that I can't do 300 because 300 is right to the edge. Even though my actual form is 320, I'm still losing like 10 pixels on each side because of the border around the form and so on thing, everything else that's in there, right? And padding and so on. So if that's true, then I got to reduce my form at a minimum width. I got to at least change this to 299. That's the grid I'm talking about. So 299 is the grid size. Okay? And if that's the case, then if I go down this way, I might as well change that to 299 too. So let's change that to 299. Now, this part here, the result, has got to hover above my grid. So I'm just putting it just above my grid right here. I moved it up a little bit. So for my numbers, if you want to copy what I have my result is 187. My grid, right, if I look at my grid, my table layout for my location is 1 and 138, right? And my size is 299 by 299. Now, yours may not be exactly like mine because you have a different computer than me, right? And your DPI is different than mine, and so yours may look a little bit different, okay? And that's okay. All right, so cool. So I've got this design. I don't know how this is going to look yet, but we're building our user interface. Question. What should I call my table layout? My table layout's name right now, right, is table layout panel. What should I call it? Keyboard or button, something like that. So I would probably call it something like this. I'll probably call it like something like button. There's a bunch of my calculator. I could call it calculator button table layout panel. It's really long. I probably won't do that to you. Button table layout panel is enough. Take the one away from the end. So button table layout panel, no one in the end. And then how about this text box? What would I call it? Any ideas? What would you call my text box? Remember, I've been calling it something over and over again already. Huh? It's not output, really. It's what? Result, right? So my result text box. I like that. Think about, I'm trying to get you to think about the business rules around my controls, right? So results, text box. That's where everything's going to go. My result text box, whatever the result is going to be. Output's not bad. There's other things you can call it, but result is really what this is doing. Okay, cool. So I got my result text box. I've got my table layout panel, my button table layout panel. That's what I've called these two things. Okay, and now I want to create some buttons. So I'm going to go over here and just look at some buttons. And I'm going to drag and drop my button into my control like this. Now when I do that, I want to make my button take the whole space. There it is. Here's my whole space, right? And I want to put a character on my button. So question, what we've been doing before is we've been changing the name of the buttons. Do you want to do that here? Because I'm going to copy this button a bunch of times. So do you want me to change the name now? No. We're going to change the name, but this isn't the time to change the name. We're going to change the name after we've copied the button, after we've laid it out, okay? So here's my button, and I want to make this button have a number on it just to give us an idea of what it's going to look like. Let's use the number 9. Okay, so I'm going to put the button number 9 in there, and that's what the button is going to look like. Now, this is a different layout than I did earlier today because I'm using 20 pixels or 20 points. Earlier, I used a smaller layout. That's fine. Cool. Now I want to copy this button all over here. And the way to do it is Control-C. You're going to love this. And Control-V, V, 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 V. Right? Nice and fast. Rapid application development, right? Where we're making something really, really quickly. Here, we got a bunch of 9s. We have to change this, right? So the first button. Now let's look at my reference. Again, I'm using the calculator from Windows 10 as my reference. So here's my calculator, right? And if you look at my reference, just to show you, I'm not going to do percent. I'm not going to do this row. I'm going to do this row. I'm not going to use C. I'm going to use C though. All right. I'm going to do almost everything else except for this. Okay. So let's start here at 7. So this is this one. Okay. And I'm going to change the number to 7. And now this is a little bit of tedium, but we have to do it together. Okay. And then on the top left, let's change this to the 7 button. You know what to do now, guys. Go. Change the rest of them. So this one was going to be the 8 button. And I'm going to show you how to do it because some people won't know or they'll do it differently. This is the 9 button. It's a 9, but let's make it the 9 button. So 9 button. By the way, there's many ways to do the same thing like we talked about. So this is not the only way you can lay things out. This is not the only naming convention. You can use a lot of things. This would be the 4 button, I believe, right? Let me see. 4 button, yeah, that's what it is. And let's change that to number 4. So what it's showing is number 4, and we're naming it 4 button, right? And this is going to show the 5. Again, a little bit of tedium, but please do this. It's good practice for your exam. Nothing's going to save you in the exam if you don't know how to do a layout quickly. Part of your mark is going to be laying out a interface, right? So it's good to learn, right? So the 6 button, I almost made the wrong choice there. And let's go back to 6. No, it's not a slip. And let's go into 1 button. That's what's going to go here. Because my layout, if I remember closely, is showing a 1. Okay, there's the 1. This will be the 2 button, showing the 2. And this is the 3 button showing the 3. Okay, we've done all of them except for this one. Here's the 0 button. These are just the numbers, right? So 0 button so far. And let's go all the way down, and let's make this a 0. Cool. Now, what goes here? Plus minus. I don't got plus minus. There's no plus minus on my keyboard, right? How about this one? This is the decimal. So we can do that one. So we'll say this is the decimal. And we'll say this is the decimal button. Oh, if I can smell it properly. There we go. And let's talk about some of these now. So we've got this part done. How about this one? This one is the equal sign. So that's what we can do. So we can say we'll call this the equals button, right? And we'll go scroll all the way down, and we'll change this to equals, the equal sign. Okay, this one, I believe it's plus minus times divide, right? So plus minus times divide. Let's try that. So this is the plus button. Please don't watch. And only watch, I mean, please do. Do this. You'll get practice on laying things out. This is important. You need to know how to do this on your own. Minus button. Right, now this is times. I'm going to use an X for this one because that's what times looks like, right? I'm going to actually call this the times button, not the multiplication button. Times button. And some people may disagree, but I'm calling it the times button. And this is going to be the X because it fits. I kind of tried a capital X in the first class. Too big. And now this is divide. That's a problem, right? I need to figure this out. I'll call it the divide button, though. Let's just put the name of the button in there. So I'll call it divide button, right? And this one is going to be a problem too, right? Because if you look at my layout, my reference, right? This here is the backspace button, right? I don't have a backspace image. So let's try that. So backspace button. Yeah, backspace button. Here we go. And this one is going to be one of two, either C or C. I'm probably going to use C. And just to jump the gun a little bit, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete one of these. Let's delete them. So I'm doing this slightly different than before. I want to make this the clear button on the left. Let's do it together. So I'm going to go here and go clear, the clear button. And now what I want this is I want this button, first of all, to show C. And I want this button to span 2 columns. 2 columns. And the way to do that is if I have my button checked like this, right? I want to go all the way up. And where it says column span, I want to change the number from 1 to 2, like this. And if it doesn't stretch, like how mine doesn't, you can stretch it now to make it fill the whole space. All right? So now you have more control. Okay, that's cool. So I got my button. I got a couple of 9. These things are placeholders, these 9s. I know they need to change because I need other symbols in here. So, question. What are the ways I can get the other symbols? Now, I'm going to put it out there to you guys. There's positives and negatives about doing this different ways. So what's a way? Can anyone think of a way of getting the actual symbols for the calculator in here? Right? I want the divide symbol. I want the plus minus symbol. I want the backspace symbol. How do I get those? Anyone have an idea? No? I could draw them, right? I could create an image because each button, right, if I look at the button on the back has a background image. I could select an image and I can make the image itself for the button be what I want it to be. But I want to avoid that for today, okay? So what's the other options? Well, I know that plus minus and divide live in something called the character map, right? So if I go down here, right, and if I look at character map, search for character map. Here it is. Built into Windows. Here's my character map, right? And if you look at the character map, I do have a plus minus right here. it's character map 000B1, and that's what the plus minus sign is, right? This one here. So I've just basically searched for the character map. I went to this. I'm using Arial. It doesn't matter the font size, the font name, because it's going to be Microsoft Sans, whatever I copy in here. So I'm going to select this one. There's my symbol. And then highlight it, copy it. I'm copying it from here. And then go into the one I want to change, which is this one. This is the plus minus. This should say plus minus button, by the way. Plus minus button. And I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom where the 9 is and copy paste. So Control V. And now I have my plus minus. That's pretty cool. However, I want to point out to you something. This is system dependent. You may or may not be able to see this across all Microsoft systems. So why? Because a font might be missing on your system. That might happen, which may mean that when you compile this thing, and if I run it on my machine, it's going to be some weird symbol. Just FYI, right? So that could happen. That is a risk, and that's why it's good to test it on different systems. So some people use an image here instead, okay? Okay, same thing with this one. So this is the divide, right? I already called it the divide button, so I don't have to do that. But I need to find the divide symbol, and I can do that by going to the symbol table again. So here's my character map, right? And I can look for the divide, and if you look down here on 00F7, you can see that there's a divide symbol. I'm going to select it, highlight it, copy it, and go back to my code. So I'm going to go highlight this thing again, scroll where it says the text value, and paste it. If I press enter, I got divide. Now, if it's too small, like divide does look, well, it probably fits okay. That probably is okay. But if it was too small, I could actually scale this particular font up a little bit. Like even if I did it now, because of everything else is so big, and if I made this like 24, if I thought that it was a little bit small, I could, or 22 maybe, that might be better. See, that's slightly better than the rest, right? Okay, cool. Plus, minus, divide. We're going to, now the only thing we're missing now is the backspace. And if you search through this, there's a couple things you could do. You could try and find some of left arrow. You could use the less than sign. You could do that. That might be confusing, right? Some people might think it's less than. Or you could use a combination of symbols. You could say less than equal to. And again, some people might say that's confusing. Maybe it's less than equal to, right? You could also go and find something that looks like an arrow. Like if you scroll all the way down here, there are arrows you can make with characters, like down here, like this. I could use this thing to indicate backspace, right? If you want, you could do that. The other option is there's also probably this one, like almost like the back, kind of like a left pointing pointer this way. And you can use this one with something else. Like, so that, let's say if I did that, I could say something like this. And I could put in an equal sign. And I can copy this so it looks like back, right? But this isn't really effective. So what can you do? Well, you can search for it, right? Let's say if I search for the backspace symbol. So if I said, I want to find the backspace symbol. And if you look at it online, now this is how intuitive it is. I can see that this is a backspace. You can also use delete, like DEL. You can actually type DEL in there. That kind of makes sense too. But let's try and see this backspace symbol. I search for backspace symbol here in Chrome. I'm going to copy this in Chrome, and I'm going to go back to my code right here, and I'm going to go down here, and let's see if it takes it. Now, for me, if I copy paste in there like this, it works, right? But for you, it may not. And I'm telling you this only because your font table and the stuff that you've set up for your computer or the computer that's in front of you that's in the lab may not work, all right? So I recommend things like DEL, some kind of way of indicating backspace. But for me, it works. Okay, so it may not work for you. And same thing with this. The divide sign may not work, and the plus minus sign may not work, right? So again, there's some options there. But so far, we're pretty good with my calculator. No functionality yet, but I've got my calculator pretty much set up. Now here's what I want to do. Let's take a look at my reference. I'm going to close the symbol table down for a second. Let's take a look at my reference. My reference has these white border or white background for all the buttons. That's what it has, right? So white background. And I want to do that for the buttons. And I want to make my equal sign a different color. Let's make it blue, just to make it so you guys can see that. So let's just choose my buttons. And I can use Shift and left click to basically select more than one control up into and including the decimal, right? And now notice that I can change all of them at once. I can go, because all of them have similar properties, I can change all the properties of them at once, which is really useful, right? Imagine if you do each individual one by hand, that's really a pain in the ass. So here I can go to color, and I want to change the color from light gray, let's use white smoke, okay? It just kind of makes them white, like this, which is kind of matching what my reference looks like, right? That's my reference. This is what my little one looks like here. It's not perfect, but it's close. And I want to make my equal sign blue. So again, I'm going to kind of hit my equal sign there. I'm going to go back to back color. Here's my back color. And I'm going to change this from light gray on the web controls. I want to find kind of a sky blue. That's what I used earlier, sky blue. And there it is. Great, I got my layout. Let's test it. Let's run it. When I run it, it looks okay. Notice the spacing between my buttons is different, right? That's not a problem. It's just the way it is, because my spacing comes from the grid. The grid itself includes padding, right? Because each of the it's a grid, right? So it's not, notice that the buttons aren't perfectly on top of each other in the grid. So too they're spaced out inside the layout, right? But this is no good. I don't like this. This is like too huggy over here, right? So to take that away, I'm going to just do something like this. I'm going to use the eye this time, and I'm going to just use the guide. So notice I just use, there's a little guide that comes up, see? And I'm going to try and make it so that it aligns with, not with the grid, that's the grid, but with the button, okay? And same thing over here. So I'm going to kind of push this in so it aligns with the button. And if I run it now, I have this. Not a little better. Notice there's a bit of space here, but it's the exact same space that the buttons have for my layout, which is okay. One more thing. This result text box, and I didn't do this with the morning class, but the result text box looks a little small, and my result text box for my reference looks quite big, right? If you actually expand this, Microsoft allows you to actually expand it so you have some kind of history. I don't care about history. We're not going to do that for our little calculator, right? But I wouldn't mind if this result text box was a little bigger. And you can do that by, if you look at, there's a little smart arrow here. I didn't show this earlier. But if you click on the smart arrow, I can actually choose multi-line. Now, if I choose multi-line, I have the ability to modify the anchors of my text box, my result text box, a little bit more, which means I can make my result text box a little bit bigger. Now, we have our interface, okay? And this is where I'm going to stop today, because I want you, for the rest of the class today, I want you to work on your interface for assignment 5. Don't do this, okay? This is not what I'm asking you to do. For lab 26, right, which I'm paying you 0.5% of your final grade for, I want you to work in class on setting up your assignment 5 layout, your user interface. I want you to look at the assignment 5 document, right? Look at the layout and actually start assignment 5. Don't call it lab 26, call it assignment 5. And I want your first draft of your user interface for assignment for assignment 5, okay? I want a zip file, right? Zip archive, as well as a link to your GitHub, your earliest version of your assignment 5, right? That's what I want, okay? So I'm done here. Let's test it one more time. We're not quite finished, just to show you just the finishing parts, right? Now, I did this fairly quickly, and one thing I always want to do before I end is I want to check that all the names are correct, because if my names are messed up, next week we're going to have a problem, right? So I'm going to go here and check them all. So is this name right? Clear button, 8 button, 9 button, 4 button, 5 button, and if there's anything that's missing, 6 button. How about this one? Divide button, backspace button, times button, minus button, plus button, And you can see that I'm going to go through all of them without calling them out, right? And making sure that they're all named appropriately. Okay? Good. We've done everything. We're ready to go. I want to put it up on GitHub, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Team Explorer, right? I'm going to go to Changes. And notice that the only thing that's changed is my designer. I didn't do anything. I didn't code anything, right? All I did was do my user interface. So I'm going to say completed first draft of calculator user interface, right? That's what it is. Now, why was it first draft? Because I don't know what the functionality is going to do to my layout. Not yet. I've got my user interface done, and when I do my functionality, I may have to tweak my layout again, right, to make sure it works properly, right? I don't know how it's going to work. For example, I made this multi-line in this version when I did it today. I didn't make that like this earlier. I only made a single line. What if multi-line messes the way this thing looks? Maybe I don't like it, right? Maybe I got to change it back to single line. I don't know yet. I can't figure that out until I start using it. And I can't use it until I start coding the back end. And I'm not going to do that today. Today is simply a user interface day, right? This is your practice for user interface, because on your exam, peoples, right, you will build a user interface. It's going to happen 100%. And look, it almost took me an hour. You have an hour and a half to do your whole exam, right? Doesn't matter if you have access to Google. It doesn't matter if you have access to any of that crap, all right? At the end of the day, you have to be quick, quick, quick. And I'll be faster. If I didn't have to explain this, I'd be faster at doing this, right? I want you to be faster at creating your interfaces, which means you need practice. Okay, so let's leave this alone, right? I'm going to put this up on, if I go to Team Explorer, right, so I'm going to go to Team Explorer. I'm going to go to Home. I'm going to go to Sync. I'm going to push this up on GitHub for you so you can always have my version, right? Very least, you have 2 copies of it. And now I'm going to stop recording. For the remainder of today, I want you to start assignment 5, create a new assignment 5 project, right? I want you to start building the user interface. Take a look at my requirements in the document, in assignment 5, and go through each of them. Make sure that you cover them, because some of you had an issue last time where you said, I didn't quite see what you wanted. If I read the requirements, but I didn't quite understand, and I did something, I lost a mark on my lab. Well, this is a great time to ask me questions. What do you mean here, Tom? Right? I expect you guys, if you don't understand something, to ask me the question so I can clarify. So you don't hand something in last minute. I can't answer questions last minute for you, right? It's impossible a lot of times, right? So ask me as we go. And this is an opportunity for us to do that. Okay, so I'm going to start recording. And when we come back next week on Tuesday, we're going to start making some functionality here. We're going to put some functionality into my calculator app. Okay? So that's it for me for today.